Hello, I'm Dr. Lisa College. Welcome to Culture by Neurodesign. Today, I am absolutely delighted to be talking to Will Savell. So Will and I met on LinkedIn, and we have had what I think is a fascinating, very illuminating discussion. So I'm really delighted that Will agreed to join me on the podcast today and to help me share our discussion with you all. So welcome, Will, today. Would you start us off by introducing yourself, please?
Hi, Lisa. It's good to be here. I'm a lifelong resident of East Tennessee in the southeastern United States, and I was diagnosed with ADD at the age of 6. My elementary school years were a struggle. My mother ended up homeschooling me, and with a scholarship that I got through the state of Tennessee, I was able to attend college. I graduated with a master's in accounting around 2008, and I've spent most of my career in managerial accounting. I've always had a passion for the written word, and recently I've chosen to pursue that full time.
Right. It always strikes me what a difference the people close to us in our lives can make to us, right? Your mum sounds like a very impressive lady. And I know from our discussion that your work spans a few sectors, which to me don't seem to be very connected at all, right? Knowing next to nothing about what you do, hospitality, pet care, and agriculture. And I'm really curious, what is the common denominator between all of those areas?
Okay, the common denominator is a couple of different things. My life experience and also the direction that I want to take professionally. I'm a bit of an amateur home cook, a bit of a culinarian, and I've experimented with a lot of things in the kitchen over the decades, and some of them I've been able to grow myself, and others I have to ask my friends about to be able to get a hold of them to try. And so through my bookkeeping business and then now in my writing, I've had the opportunity to work with several independent restaurants in the area, farms, agricultural collaboratives, and farm-to-table cuisine. So small farm preservation, urban agricultural development, and really bringing farm to table to more of a mainstream is a kind of a core belief for me.
Right.
And then with regard to my pets and working with them, I have experience working with several veterinary hospitals and interacting with large working dogs. At parties, it's not unusual to be able to find me from the sound of barking. I've got an inexplicable attraction, I guess, for dogs, and so it just sort of works out. Currently, I have 2 Alsatians and a golden retriever in my family, and I've traveled from Florida to Maine with 2 of them, and they've both weighed over 100 pounds. So finding hotels and restaurants that are very pet friendly is a real treasure and a rarity for me. So I think I see them. There's also a lot of farm dogs in this area, so I see all of those as very symbiotic, and they come together here in Southern Appalachia. Lisa, initially, what inspired you to delve into the enigmatic fields of, you've got neuroscience, behavioral health, organizational psychology, all of these, it seems like you're pulling from to do what you do.
Yeah, in the beginning of our discussion, we were really trying to work out like what is going on with each other, right? We've got all these very distant seeming things that we both have in our at our fingertips that we're drawing on in our work, and we were learning why. So yeah, I'm also and just as you described it, I'm a big believer in following your interests and your instincts and seeing where they take you. My goal with my life is to die without regretting having not tried something. So whenever I see something that I am very curious and passionate about, I try to follow it. And so because of that, I've moved across a few very different worlds, and it was quite difficult for people to see the through line for a long time, because I was just doing what I was interested in, what I felt passionate about, and that's also what you saw and what you asked about. So I think it's only really recently that all my experience seems to make sense, and that I'm actually drawing on all my experience in this context of being an entrepreneur. Having become a parent to 2 kids, one of whom's autistic with learning difficulties, that changed how I look at what you want to achieve, how I look at happiness, how I view success. And the autism diagnosis, it made me go really, really deep into research, into the evidence, into learning, into building new skills. And that was partly to manage my fears, but also partly to create a better environment for him. And I drew on everything in my background. I threw it all at it, and I actually do need it all. With my background, it was impossible for me not to start applying my kind of natural tendency to look at the evidence and to apply that as a leader in the workplace. And eventually a very different kind of leadership style started to emerge in my head. It took me a while to feel confident enough to share it, because it was quite different from what I was hearing from other people. But I did share it, and it works. It works for everybody, and the impact is great. It's much stronger than I was prepared for. Yeah, thanks for asking about that. So we actually started this discussion when you responded to a post about a podcast that I had recorded with a gentleman called Robert Annis. And one of the topics I was discussing with Robert that you responded to was that there are very desirable skills that autistic people bring to the workplace, but it's really important to balance those skills with seeing the challenges that autistic people face in the workplace. And if anybody wants to have a listen to that episode, it's episode 27. The comment that you placed on that post was really about the importance of balance, and why we can't only support somebody by looking at the positives. We have to look at the negatives as well, or the challenges as well. So it was natural for me to ask you, I think, at that point, like what have you noticed in those independent values-led businesses that your interests have taken you to now, in terms of how they talk about inclusion?
Mm-hmm. It's really striking the similarities in your journey to so many others, where you come into that situation, and then you start learning very rapidly the differences and strengths. I've encountered when I was first diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, I was very young. Wow. And it was a very brief session with my pediatrician, followed by a prescription for Ritalin, which really ran rapid at the time, the use of that drug. Fortunately, my parents followed a path that's not dissimilar to what you're doing.
Would you share with us how it's impacted your work?
Okay. In my roles, I've always tried to present as neurotypically as possible, right? My struggles have been a lot of times staying seated at my desk. I want to get up, move around, and then staying on task. And so that's something that I've really had to focus on from a very early age. Now, in Southern Appalachia, public access to developmental and behavioral health services is low. And as a child, I was taken out of public school and homeschooled, and then placed into a private school during my high school years. I had to have accommodation on test. It took me longer, but I was able to, when given the time, I was able to do well. And then a lot of what I was taught, even from the elementary school period, was about fitting in. conforming to the world more than um, more than anything. And I think that feigning normalcy, though, it requires a lot of energy. Um, and I was able to reach an executive level by my early 30s, uh, doing just that, feigning normalcy. And um, you develop a pay no attention to the man behind the curtain type of
Mm.
facade that uh, really isn't healthy. And that those things started to manifest in my personal life as well. There's um, emotional fatigue, burnout, um, and um, it's really played a significant role in me changing my career path to align more with my core attributes and really what I require to survive, to live. And I've learned that I can't keep wearing that mask. Um, and really that's resulted in me becoming more outspoken about my experiences very recently.
Wow. I mean, it's a big step. I know it's a huge step and a brave step to start to speak out about something which, well, which you spent so many years trying to hide. Um, it's a big deal. You don't know how people are going to react, and of course, it's very personal. It's very emotional. What was it that changed to make you decide to be more open about that?
As I hit a wall, it was burnout, basically. Um, I didn't draw any energy from what I was doing, and it's something that I'm dealing with now in my transition to a completely different mindset of how do I derive energy from my work
Mhm.
uh, when I write or when I help someone else edit their work. um, I feel like I'm bringing things together for people. And when I'm working, especially with the farm industry, with so many people here want to do the farm direct restaurants, and when I work with them, I really feel a sense of connection, uh, of cultural connection, and that I'm doing
Mhm.
something that's important. Um, and even when I'm talking to my veterinary clients, uh, I just I draw uh, a lot of energy and a lot of I'm able to interact, I guess, in a way that I wasn't before, and it's been very positive.
Great. I've got such a lot of admiration for how you've turned burnout into something so positive for yourself and for others. Um, yeah, for yourself and also for your clients and for everybody who is reading your writing and who you're helping with editing and so on as well. How have you found that people respond?
Well, I think it's different depending on who I'd be talking about. And in the workplace, it's been mixed. I think people who really know me, they haven't been surprised. Um, but I think a lot of people are shocked, though, if they aren't in my inner circle, um, and and especially at the professional level, they try to be empathetic, and sometimes um, that can seem contrived. I know um, many times neurodivergent people have different body language, uh, but they key in on your body language very well.
Mhm.
And so that that can make you feel, that overzealous, contrived empathy sometimes, and then the adherence to guidelines. They want to make sure that they're checking all the boxes, and I really feel like there's some misconceptions, especially in my area, um, even at a very high professional level of what it means to be neurodivergent or having a learning difficulty. Um, then at the street level and with blue collar working people, um, I think you have um, a lot of people who relate to that, um, even on a personal level, because nearly everyone has that feeling that either they've experienced it themselves or they have a friend or colleague or family member who's struggled with the same thing. Autism, I think that there's a bit of an extended um, lack of understanding because when you bring up autism, they many times want to know, well, why is this person not sitting in the corner with headphones? Why is this person so very communicative and engaging? And it can surprise them. When you talk about something more like dyslexia, uh, many times they'll get confused. They don't really know or understand what that is. And at that point in the conversation, they ask, well, you want to go grab a beer or something, we can get some dinner. Tell a doctor or a counselor that you express symptoms of ADHD, autism, and dyslexia, or any combination, and they have a tendency to want to move on with a topic that they were already discussing to begin with, and they'll even have almost a physical wince or tick, and it's really hard to find medical professionals in my region that will really go into any depth with those issues. Sometimes I've had friends open up to me and even family members, and they tell a very typical story of struggling in school, having bad test scores early on. They end up on prescription without a whole lot of help or intervention. And then they end up in some sort of alternative school, right? And many times what you'll see is the Adderall or Ritalin or whatever they're on doesn't really work for them, primarily because that's all the help that they're getting. And they'll end up selling that to rich kids that are at private schools and taking that money and using it for something else, to either self-medicate or do something else with their time that helps them cope. And that's really disturbingly common. Occasionally, I receive a very negative reaction, and really that's become much more common very recently. And typically, it almost sounds like a response that I would have heard off of the news. Almost, it sounds almost like a programmed response, where somebody is recoiling from something that they misunderstand about a DEI initiative. So, and that's a little spooky, quite honestly.
Yeah, it's sad that there's so much negative reaction, even though we experience a lot of positive as well. I think it's certainly a learning journey, right, in how people think and respond to something that is very, very unknown to them. I'd just like to go into a little bit the point that you mentioned a couple of minutes ago about programmed responses or contrived responses that you experience. And do you have a couple of examples that you could share just to give an idea of the kind of formulaic response that you're mentioning, or those awkward guidelines that you feel people are adhering to?
Yeah. The regurgitated comments that relate to the really unabashed anti-DEI political speech. One that I recently encountered when discussing Jeremiah Cafe was someone basically said, I don't care about DEI, I just want to know about the food. And then there's the common, well, she or he was a diversity hire. And the obvious implications of that being that that person was an inferior choice, but they had to be selected because of DEI. A more thought out or intellectual approach I hear quite often is the implication that diversity, equity, and inclusion practices by default require discrimination against non-protected demographics to fill quotas. Does that happen? I'm sure it does on occasion. Is eliminating DEI the answer? I don't see how it could be. Then when you look at corporate guidelines, there's always the clause due accommodation, right? They want to make sure that they're offering due accommodation to individuals. And that's a term that can really be taken out of context and used to cover a multitude of sins, really. And then you hear this, well, he or she just isn't getting it. Well, why are they not getting it? Then you'll end up with cleverly worded work requirements that allow for discriminatory practices within the framework of the law. And I think there was a recent Wall Street Journal article actually that I saw. Is millions of resumes never make it past the bots, and it's something that deals with the use of AI screening tools now. And it was by Lauren Weber. And I thought that was very interesting, that has evolved to a whole different sphere now. So
yeah, indeed. Oh, you mentioned that article to me when we were communicating before this podcast. So I looked up the link, and I'll share it in the notes for this episode in case anybody wants to have a look. Okay. In case they have access to a Wall Street Journal. But yeah, let's just stay on this topic a bit longer, because you're certainly not the only advocate for inclusion who's hearing those kind of dismissive comments like, "Oh, he or she was a diversity hire," and those inherent implications of low quality. I have to say, myself, I used to just dismiss these and think, "Oh, that's stupid, that's ill-informed, that's short-sighted," or whatever word you would choose. Sometimes it was quite a rude word that I probably shouldn't say on the podcast. I won't do it. But yeah, it's easy to dismiss those points of view. But now I think that we have to take those points of view seriously if we really want to make change, and if we really want to improve our workplaces and improve society for neurodivergent people and for people who are otherwise discriminated against. I mean, that sentiment is big enough, it's real. You mentioned that it's growing in America at the moment, and you hinted that was because of the political situation. So I think that if we ignore it, at best it will just send it underground and make it more difficult to deal with, and more difficult to try to get people who think that to take a different point of view. And at worst it will make the person even more like anti what you and I are trying to do on this podcast, right? Which is to raise awareness and improving inclusion in our workplaces and our society. Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned it, and I've just mentioned it there in that comment. Political sensitivity. There's a whole new dimension to inclusion going on in the United States now with your current administration. Is that something that you would mind elaborating on a little bit for us?
Certainly. Under the current administration, DEI initiatives have become the target of efficiency programs, along with many other things. These have resulted in unilateral cutbacks at the federal level, right? It's become a highly polarized issue, and really it's being used as a political lever, which is really sad. The original intent, I think, has been lost, and of course, the result is minority groups that are supposed to be the focus of these initiatives are not being protected, but they're really becoming political collateral, and it really exacerbates their disenfranchisement. And add to that the idea that's been floated by the current administration of reverse discrimination, and it feels like there's a strong undercurrent that's even vilifying the diversity advocate. Specifically, the administration's rhetoric surrounding the topic of autism really seems to have become tone deaf and ill-informed, and it almost gives a feeling that they feel like autism is some sort of infectious disease, or they don't have an understanding of what they're talking about. I believe that their direct attribution of social ills, like they talk about autism destroying families, is just wrongheaded, and perhaps even a bit malicious. It's always been a lack of understanding and accommodation in the case of people who are neurodivergent, I think, that has propagated those social ills, and not actually the neurodivergent themselves, you know. And with, I mean, there's very few exceptions for maybe people who suffer from like what are known as the dark triad personality disorders, which is not neurodivergence. That's a separate issue with mental health. But I think it's accurate to say that, you know, the DEI initiatives, especially at the neurodivergent level, were working, and now they're being cut. And to my mind, tolerance for the politicization, I can't say the word.
Politicization.
Yes.
I'm struggling as well. That.
Yeah. Of DEI, or even psychological and behavioral health at large. It's just, it propagates jockeying and divisiveness and political manipulation, and it doesn't give us any good solutions. And these issues affect everyone. So I think only with a really open, scientific, collaborative approach are we going to get the solutions we need. And I think that really reflects the sentiments of the majority of people in the States and really worldwide.
Yeah. I mean, it's scary to see what's happening, quite honestly, and I'm wondering where it's leading to, and especially the comment that you made there about autism destroying families. That's something that is coming up. That is something that's especially painful to me. In my situation with an autistic son. I mean, I do know that there are real examples where the pressure of having an autistic child may be the end of a relationship that was already shaky, and the pressure is real. I'm not trying to dismiss it. It is real. There are studies showing higher levels of stress hormones in the blood of parents of neurodivergent kids than in the parents of neurotypical kids. So it's real, but I think it's too easy to take these difficult, very sad stories and generalize them as though that's the only truth. As I say, it's definitely not easy, but I actually think that the situation with our son has made our family unit stronger. And I can trace a lot of it back to just being very conscious about what we want to achieve, what we want to offer our kids, and just very thoughtful about how we can do it in this situation. And I think with the right support, and that's what's so critical, with the right support, and maybe with the right mindset and the right culture around each family, there's a lot that every family can do, I think, to build connections with an autistic or otherwise neurodivergent child, and with each other around that child as well. I really do believe that. So it's so sad to see the kind of backwards progress that seems to be going on at the moment. But become slightly more cheerful. I do meet a lot of people who are genuinely curious to learn about the kind of experience that I'm having, and they ask really, really good open questions about neurodivergence, and they listen very actively. And I find that especially the younger generation in the Netherlands are very, very comfortable in these discussions, and always ask very good questions. And quite often I have to think quite hard to find the answer. Sometimes I don't feel like the discussion, if I'm perfectly honest. Sometimes I'm tired, or it's like I just don't want to talk about this anymore for now. But then I have to remind myself that respectful curiosity is probably the single most valuable ingredient for change that we have, and I think we need to build on it and reinforce it when we find it. But yeah, but to get back to realism, I mean, referring back to a comment that you made earlier as well, I do meet a lot of people who feel very uncomfortable in these discussions as well, and they just want to kind of get themselves out or get the discussion over with as quickly as possible. Even sometimes in the workplace, I've talked with people who are really scared to have these kind of discussions with people in their teams, because they know enough to know that they could say something to cause offence, and so they decide not to try. And I think something like that is a real danger of the kind of political environment that you're describing. It's really a sad example of the fear that's growing around DEI as it's getting more and more political. I mentioned that the younger generation in the Netherlands is noticeably more comfortable with the discussions about neurodivergence. And do you notice a difference between different groups of people in the US and how they respond to the discussion about neurodivergence?
Yes. I think regarding the difference in response, really in this area based on gender, I think women exhibit a distinctively higher interest and level of engagement. They also seem to be more comfortable showing empathy, and I feel like men have a tendency to reach for a tool. They're trying to find something quick to either have a good answer, or they want to try to fix it. And they have some sort of they want to find some sort of a pre-existing set of guidelines or framework, or some sort of a proven expert to lean on. And I think they try to go there very rapidly. And then trying to find common ground in some other unrelated topic, and try to move on. I've seen that a lot.
Yeah. And again, I think it's something that's easy to dismiss, right? That it's easy for us to just say, oh, you know, that they should feel more comfortable, they should get over it and ask some questions. But this is a real difficulty for a lot of people.
Mhm.
I mean, if I go back to your point about gender, I thought about it since we first discussed this in our LinkedIn chat, and I can't really find a gender difference here in the Netherlands in terms of comfort discussing neurodivergence. I think when you're in the discussion, it's definitely women who focus more on the emotional side and what does this mean to you, how do you cope as a parent, that kind of thing, and men tend to be more interested in what causes autism in the case of my family, or how did you notice that there was something that you needed to get diagnosed. So it's much more practical and factual, but both men and women seem here to be equally willing to get into the discussion, as far as I can see. So I think what we're discussing here is really a difference in national culture between the US and Netherlands. And it's a really important aspect to take into account as well when we talk about neurodivergence inclusion. But it's quite common to say, you've met one neurodivergent person and you've met one neurodivergent person. Like everybody is different who is neurodivergent, just as everybody who is neurotypical is different. But as well as the individual differences, I think we need to be careful to factor in differences in the environment as well. That's one of the reasons that I think that in the workplace, inclusion really has to be a two-way street, right? It's not enough for a neurodivergent person to show their diagnosis and say everything has to shift around us. They also need to be tolerant of well-meaning attempts, given the culture that they find themselves in, to attempt a discussion. Maybe they might not land quite perfectly, or maybe they might feel a little bit off, but I think it's also important for the neurodivergent person to see those attempts what they are, which is maybe an attempt to really overcome a very uncomfortable situation for someone. And it is really difficult to know how to respond. I know, if I think back to the time before I was so firmly in this world, before my son arrived, and before we realized that there was something not going as you'd expect in his development, I had very little idea of what neurodivergence was. It was pretty much limited to Rain Man, just bad in Rain Man. I know at some point before we got the diagnosis for him, we did wonder whether he was autistic. But this will show you how little we knew. We said, "Oh, he likes cuddling, therefore he can't be autistic." That was just how little we knew about it. It shows you the level of knowledge we had. And my husband and I, we travelled extensively for work. We've interacted with people in all kinds of different cultures all over the world. So we thought that we had a very broad perspective and a broad experience of life and cultures. But yet neither of us had really any idea how to respond to the area of neurodivergence. So I think, also from my personal perspective, I think it's a real fear for a lot of people to get into those discussions, and we do need to take it seriously if we want to make progress and not just dismiss those people. So that was a long thought sharing from Lisa, but I'm sure that there are some people listening to this, or people listening who know people who may feel very comfortable if a colleague will say to them, "I've got ADD," or "I feel like I'm autistic and maybe I need a diagnosis." Do you have some advice for people as to how they could respond if they do feel uncomfortable, like a framework that they could call on, that might feel more engaging and real to the person on the other side?
Yeah, absolutely. Neurodivergence is just another way that we're different, right?
Mhm.
So I think active listening is key. And the best way to understand someone else who has ADD, ADHD, autism, any learning difficulty or difference, is to really listen to what they're telling you, and then try to ask them non-leading questions to help you understand how that individual really experiences neurodivergence for themselves, and really what it means to them to be neurodivergent. And then from there, you move on to try and find commonality. So for all the differences that we have, there's always more things that we share in common. So I think picking something that you both enjoy or share and building on that really, I think that really helps to lay a foundation of trust and understanding. And then discuss complementary strengths. Neurodivergent people perceive and interact with the world differently than neurotypical people, and differently than other neurodivergent people, right? So that means that they'll likely notice things and see things differently that a neurotypical person or another neurodivergent person might miss. They may come up with different ideas or way of doing things that may not have been considered. And a neurotypical person may help them by repeating a word or catching something that they've lost, and help draw things back into focus. So I think it helps when you talk about complementary strengths. You get a broader and richer perspective and context on anything. Really, when you have people looking at it from different perspectives, and human beings are social creatures, and we do better when we work as a team. So
when we pull those complementary strands. Yeah, I mean, I love these tips. I really like these tips. They're so practical, and I think it's a good framework to give people a way to move from what might feel like an awkward situation, a bit of a scary situation, into a real human conversation. And it's also a framework, that there's some edges, but there's a lot of space in the middle to give people the space to make your tips relevant to the particular situation that they're in and the particular person that they're talking to. There's just one final thought for me that I'll share is that actually what you're describing isn't that different from how we would. Oh, there's a dog right at the end. From how we would like someone to respond if any of us shares any different. So for example, you say you're from the US. I say I'm British, but I live in the Netherlands. And then we exchange experiences, and we find common ground, and we find things to talk about. It's also exactly the same as having a regular discussion. A regular discussion with anybody. It just happens that the person is neurodivergent. So, Charlie, it's nice to hear from you.
Yes, thank you, Charlie.
But I think that's a great place to wrap up our discussion for today. So, thanks so much for your time, Will, and for sharing so generously of your personal experiences, your experiences with the restaurants where you live, and for touching on so many aspects of neurodivergence inclusion. I've really enjoyed the discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate it.
I hope that you enjoyed that discussion with Will as much as I did. I really appreciated the range of topics that Will was willing to discuss with us. Thought it was fascinating. If you think of a friend or a colleague, a connection who you think would also value listening to the points that Will was making in this podcast, then please do share on the podcast with them. Every listen helps to make our workplaces and our society a more inclusive place for people who think differently, for neurodivergent people. So it's all valuable. It all helps. And if you are recognizing some of what we talked about in your own team, perhaps you're having a challenge to feel that you're adequately including someone who you suspect may be autistic or may have ADHD or otherwise have a different kind of neurostyle, a different style of communicating, then please feel free to set up a consultation with me. It's completely free. We'll just talk about what your seeing. We'll make a start on looking at what the underlying causes could be, and we'll have a chat about the extent to which neurodivergence inclusion could help to make your team a more engaging and high-performing one. There's absolutely no obligation, so then you could choose to continue, or you could choose to say, thanks, I'll take the value that you've given me in the consulting conversation and continue on your own way. Either way, I look forward to speaking to you soon. And thanks again for listening.